Okay, so today I have a conversation with Adrian. Adrian is a friend that I have met in Warsaw while he was visiting here, and specifically the meditation group that I attended. Adrian is a tech entrepreneur and an overall curious person. Professionally, he is busy and has been busy connecting the tech community and facilitating events in that field. Has a lot of meditation experience himself. And as I know him, he's curious about social issues, topics of the mind, meditation, self-development, all these interesting things. And today we would like to discuss a topic that interests him for the past time, which is the broad topic of focus versus distraction. Did I get that correctly so far?
Yes, that's accurate, Gabriel. Yeah, well, great to be in your podcast. Excited to discuss with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, happy to discuss these topics as this is some of the areas I've been practicing and thinking quite a lot about in the last years and months.
So maybe for an introduction, what is the practical value of this question for you before we get into obviously the more difficult, differentiated theoretical aspects of it?
Well, first and foremost, since I've been, an entrepreneur for 12 years, I've always trying to find, what's the best way for me to feel more at flow. I think the core keyword would be flow, right? State of flow. So this is an area I've done a lot of practice and research, right? What brings flow into our mind and to our consciousness, right? So, and what is flow,
And
right?
But let me start with, why is flow important to you? What does...
Yes, so the idea of flow is basically when you're basically performing something, when you're trying to get good at specific activity or specific craft, right? So for example, for years, I've been coding for 16 years. So I've been thinking, okay, what could make me be a great coder? What practices could I implement in my daily life that could actually help me become a great coder? So I started doing a lot of research, not just in terms of what practices bring the ultimate, quote unquote, ultimate performance in people, right? Either if it's an athlete, if it's a writer, if it's a poet, if it's, whatever area, people really focus in a specific endeavor, right? What brings the best kind of performance, so to speak, or the best connection with that craft, So yeah, I've been doing tons of practices and research and experiment into basically what activities kind of help me produce this kind of connection with the work that I do, right?
I have a question just to throw it in. In this research, what are common answers that you found you could reject? What are misconceptions that people have that's like, because I think many people have this kind of question and read books and listen to podcasts and so on. What did you find are common misconceptions that people think are great for developing general skill in whatever you do, and you found it's bogus, basically?
I think the first and foremost is that, there's so much information out there that tells you can get good at something in this amount of time, right? So it's like, I feel there's no shortcut to feel at flow with whatever you do. There's no quick path. There's no quick hack, so to speak. Meaning it's a sort of it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Meaning what I'm trying to say here is to feel connected with whatever work that you do and feel more at flow. It's a long-term process that requires a lot of testing.
Ah.
So the misconception is that there's no one recipe, there's no few things you should do. There's no 10 steps or 10 points you should follow that will make you really good at something.
Yes.
It's a constant exploratory path, meaning because every mind, every conscious being, every person has different triggers to a specific habits, right? So
if I may translate that into what I believe you're saying is, so let's say I'm a sportsman, right? And I'm trying to improve my running skills. So I train obviously from childhood on. And then when I'm 21 and I'm at the peak of my physical abilities, it dawns on me, it's like, oh, it's, I don't know, I can give us an example, but it's doing without trying, or some sort of a maxim comes up in my mind, some sort of credo comes in my mind. And then it has an effect on me because it symbolizes the last jump that I needed personally to get to this point of excellence. Okay, and then I remember that, and when people ask me, so, oh, what have you been doing in order to get to this excellence, then I remember the one kind of epiphany that I had, the one insight, and it's like, this is what you have to do. You have to do without trying, or something like that, or you have to believe in God, or you have to just let go, or you have to be in tune with yourself. And then I can write a book about that. And then the misconception would be that people think, oh, this is what I have to do, without seeing that this epiphany that the excellent sportsman had was based on thousands and thousands of hours of practice, and its mind came up with something that looks like a recipe, but it's actually not a recipe. It's more an effect of the intense friction that the mind had with this practice, and suddenly it came up with something that clicked for that person. So is that more or less what you're saying?
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. So it's basically people getting into the process of intent, right? So the example of you trying to be a great athlete, right? So the athlete has a committed intent to this connection, mind and body and performance, right? So it's like a strong commitment and a strong intent to follow through that process, right? And then follow through and basically exploring without even a specific, I mean, you have a clear objective, meaning being faster, right? So you want to run 100 meters. Okay, yes, but it's not so much being fast in that 100-meter line. It's more about the process itself, right? So how you basically confront this process in the long term, meaning you're constantly running 100 meters, 100 meters, 100 meters. Is how you confront this effort and how of the 100 meters, meaning every time you run, does it become faster? Does it become easier or harder? Or every time do you run, do you feel much more connected with your body or not? Do you feel more connected with your purpose in life, right? Meaning maybe running 100 meters gives you a strong purpose, like, okay, it gives you a strong connection with your body, and that makes you feel a lot more connected with the people around you, right? So it's kind of the process itself that it's very important, the process of doing something versus the actual goal itself, right? The goal is important, but too much, especially now in social media stuff, right? The focus, and then habits and focus, meaning you should have a goal and then you should do this 10 things, right? Yes, of course you could, but you could try those 10 things and they would not click. That's a problem. And people start feeling frustrated because they don't click, right?
Yeah.
But what they don't see, it's like, no, it's more about, it's an open process, right? And this is why, going back to meditation, meditation kind of brings all the answers, not so the answers, but it's like a path, right? For which you enter, and there's no goal, right? Meditation has no goal. It's just a path you enter, and there's a process in there, right? For
And
which, yep.
to pick up what something that you said before, there's a lot of trying and experimenting necessary, right? Which requires the curiosity and the commitment. If I'm not, or let me put it differently, if I'm only partly committed, right? If I want something only for a certain sake, for the sake of, I want to lose weight because I want to look good, and it's not representative of the place that I am right now in life, for example, then only part of the resources, my mental resources, would dedicate themselves to exploring what it means. And the more I'm committed, the more there is an interest in the trial and error process, and an interest in because improvement is not linear, right? Sometimes we have to throw some things out. Sometimes we have to gather new things. Sometimes we have to stick to a formula against inner demons. And there's hardly someone who can tell us what the exact phase I'm in right now. So it needs this kind of struggle, this strive, with an intense dedication. And then the process becomes fruitful, but it needs those things that don't necessarily work out, or where I'm gaining experience that I can only use, in 2 years' time. It's very meandering in a sense. It's going in one direction, but it's not a straight line, and which is again something that I think self-help guides might kind of misrepresent, because when we read a book, it might look like it's a straight line, and let me emulate that. So if I'm doing something that doesn't result in a direct improvement, probably I'm wrong.
Yes.
That would be a misconception.
Yeah, and also to add to that is, the problem is all the self-help content out there it has like a marketing bias, meaning
yes,
the content is constructed around a very kind of linear approach, progressive approach, right? They make it look as a linear progression, right? Or a meditation practice, like a linear thing, right?
it sells,
but most of the time,
yeah.
Exactly, because linear things sell, right? It's like you start here, you end up here, right? So yeah. it sells, the idea sells, but in reality, it's very volatile, right? So
yes,
highs, you get a higher, and lower lowers as well, right? So it's a constant, like the markets, sometimes they go higher, and then you go low, and then sometimes very low, and then you sometimes very, very high. So it's like, and then hopefully, yes, you go in an increase, right? But yeah, it's this constant.
Yeah, there's an additional aspect that we don't know. We don't know how the unconscious kind of processes things. So just because I have a certain idea of how improvement should work is not necessarily how the unconscious digests failures, for example, or alternative plans, distractions, and so on. It might, we as kind of the conscious entities of ourselves, we might become aware of an improvement only post factum, so after the fact.
Yep.
When we saw that, oh, okay, now I had a jump of understanding, and I don't know where it's coming from. And of course, it doesn't come from heaven or something. It comes from experiences that the unconscious had digested in a non-linear way. And here, I think we luckily arrived at the center of your topic, which is focus versus distraction.
Exactly. So this is the area that I've been thinking about, considering that it's not a linear approach. It's a very volatile sort of trial and error process, right? Of basically feeling connected with whatever work that you're doing.
Yeah.
One of the areas I've been thinking about is, okay, sometimes I feel I'm very focused and I feel that I should focus. But sometimes I feel, well, maybe no, maybe this time I should be more distracted and let myself feel distracted, right? Like not focused and hitting around the place, not very, feeling that I'm not going anywhere, the feeling that you're not going anywhere, so even exploring that path, because right now the common parlance, so to speak, is you should know where you're going, right? Every single time you should know your direction, you should know the path that you're in.
Yes.
but do you really? Overall, yes, of course, but sometimes you don't need to know where you're going, right? And I guess that's okay. But the problem is, I think we have built like this collective anxiety, right? That it's now allowing individuals to feel lost, right?
Yes. Now here, obviously, we're in a complex topic, which is affected by many phenomena in life and does affect many phenomena in life. One thing that affects this topic is, I think, an overall economic model that we apply also to private life, which is to have a maximum efficiency. And if I have stakeholders or shareholders, they're not very interested in me exploring things without any function or getting creative or artistic with the capital they have invested in me, right? They want like, okay, we want accountability. You took our money. You promised to maximize the profit. Where is it? Right? So there is a certain mindset that comes with that. This is the automatic translation of the mindset into, or the demands of other people into my own mind. I want to know exactly where I'm going. I want to know that I don't waste my valuable time or lifetime. And then we have, extended, if there's some more pressure from my family, for example. So I have a partner. My partner also wants to know where I'm going, where we are going. There is a legitimate kind of interest in, can we have children next year or not? Are we staying in the UK or in Bangkok next year or not? So the outside life, as much as I think many people can connect with the overall creative, artistic, curiosity-driven approach, the outside life, it seems at least, enforces on us this economic model, or the model of limited resources and maximizing results.
Exactly.
Now, you took the liberty of having a life that is quite free. You travel a lot, not so much in COVID time, but right now, for example, you're in Tbilisi for a few months, and you have lived in many, many places. So you have chosen a lifestyle that allows you to explore different facets of life and your mind. Do you think that still, even if people are in normal circumstances, that they overestimate the validity of the economic model, that they underestimate how much freedom they actually have to be non-linear and exploratory?
Interesting. That's a cool question. I think what I've perceived is that, so I think people need to go through what I call life fracture moments, meaning I think by default, we're built into very tight constraints, mental constraints, systemic constraints, peer network constraints, right? So we're introduced into a peer network, family network, right? For which our space of action mentally is somewhat constrained by the other, right? So the other, and meaning what I mean the other, I put family, friends, and any other peer group. The other could be a limiting constraint by default, right? So we're put into this social schematic, life schematic in whatever city people were born, right? So, but then, life goes on, and then maybe there's a fracture point. Maybe at some point when you were 12, 15, you fracture your leg or your knee, and you realize that you were not exactly living the way you were, because you were not aware that you could do more with your, being healthy. Just a very simple example. People are not even aware that they're actually being healthy is a very important thing.
Yes.
Right, until they lose it.
Yes.
Right. So go back to my point is, I think people need to overestimate the crisis. People underestimate the crisis crisis points. I think time of crisis, definitely there's a lot of interesting content there to extract and utilize, meaning people should not avoid feeling like crap. People should not avoid crisis. People should not avoid things being chaotic and messy. There's a lot of room to reshuffle this systemic constraint in terms of our mind, right? So COVID, obviously, just a very recent example. I mean, for me, few things have changed and so on, but for a lot of people, really, it was like a systemic, deep change, right? COVID, then the pandemic. So obviously, this is definitely an opportunity to exactly reshuffle those mental schematics, right? Meaning, should you reassess your goals and your habits? Should you start really more of an exploratory kind of gray path, meaning you don't know exactly what you want and you don't know exactly what you're doing, but it's this gray zone. I mean, I think people should be okay feeling into this gray zone being a place of comfort versus discomfort, meaning maybe the comfort place is some discomfort, right? So
yeah, I will try to rephrase that in terms that are more familiar to me. It sounds like you're representing already now, when you say this, a meditative mindset, by which I mean, when we practice meditation, part of the endeavor is the flexibility to assume different points or different positions of the mind. So sometimes I sit for a formal meditation, I want to concentrate on things. Sometimes I want to explore a very specific topic, 360 degrees, so pros and cons, and to be really free in this exploration. Sometimes I want to discover something that I have no idea where it is in my mind and where it's coming from. So for example, I might be interested to explore the general feeling that I have right now. Where does it start? Where does it end? Is it something that comes from a certain event yesterday or today? Is it something that has followed me for the past 15 years? So there's just such a flexibility that is necessary to perform meditation, and I think it kind of it translates into a flexibility in life as well. So because sometimes we need to explore something painful, right? So there might be we sit down for meditation with something difficult having happened, some sort of loss, missed opportunity, an argument with my partner, whatever it is. And as it so often happens in meditation, it comes to the foreground in a very dramatic, strong way. And then I might be interested to explore that. And explore that, of course, not in a daydreamy, self-righteous way, but really explore from different angles. What is the position of my partner there? Are there any positive sides to this crisis that I'm facing? So, and only then there is a freedom of the mind there that allows me to stay afloat and not to be sucked in to the emotional implication of the drama, which would invariably be an exposition to a one-directional emotional freight train that goes into catastrophizing and self-pity, for example.
Right.
So this is the normal mode. Something horrible happens, and then I start just obsessing about it, and I get worse and worse and worse. Eventually it dissipates, or I can do something about it. In meditation, we practicing partly, right? It's not all of meditation, but we partly practice to look at those things, to leave them where they are. We assume different positions around it. We look at it from the back, from the front, the positive, the negative, which gives us a lot of freedom. And I think that your basic recommendation, let's not avoid crises. Let's see what there is to learn from that. That is a result from a meditative mindset that you have practiced for many years.
Well, and also the pain, right? I think pain, I call it pain theory. So pain tolerance, pain threshold. So intrinsically, our minds and our brains and our consciousness, for some reason, yes, we avoid pain, right? So if it's hot, we move our hand. If it prickles, we move, you know, so we're kind of systematically built to avoid pain. So basically saying you should confront pain kind of does not go according to our direct systemic framework, right?
Even genetic.
Yes, so that's a problem, right? So, but it turns out, and this is the part that it goes back to the focus versus distraction, right? So sometimes the strong discoveries, meaning going back to this linear approach, right, of
improving
progression and growth, right? So sometimes, you know, an uptick, so to speak, in the graph, or an improvement or whatever, comes through those crossing that threshold of pain. Sometimes it has worked for me that I need to up that pain tolerance to see that threat, to basically get up over the hump. You know, it's like the hump. I cannot see, there's like a hump or a cloud that I can still, the vision is not clear. It's fine. It's fine that I feel like that. But sometimes it maybe I should need to up my pain tolerance to gain some clarity, and then I will get foggy again. But then I feel I made at least some movement. I like the word movement, not progression, movement. You see?
Yes.
Because I wouldn't like to say progression. Progression is, it's a bit fussy concept, right? Because what does progression actually mean? It's more like, I feel as flow, movement, right? I feel there's some movement, right? In whatever direction. And I think the problem is static. Sometimes is the part of it, static versus, you know, distraction versus focus, static versus not static. So when should we feel very static, and when should we feel that movement, right? And it's a part of still, you know, thinking. Is it a matter of balance? Should we have a balanced amount of pain and comfort? Should we have a balanced amount of, you know, focus versus distraction? This is a problem. I have problems with balance, right? I still, it's a concept I still have an issue with, you know?
I think it's a very tricky question. And when questions are so tricky, maybe it's necessary to look somewhere else. It's, from my perspective, I think it needs a lot of wisdom to know when to leave, when the static becomes rigid and it makes me grumpy, it makes me disillusioned, it makes me less vital. Like, these are effects of rigidity in life. I'm on autopilot. I don't know even why anymore I go to work. I don't know why I'm with that partner, or why I'm not changing things. I just, you know, in kind of state of mind of accepting is what it is. Time runs by and eventually I'm old and die, basically. So this is the extreme end of what kind of the static mindset can turn into. But I also know extremes of the flexibility, where people are somehow, they have stopped, they got into a mindset of maybe spirituality or self-development or self-growth, for which obviously some part of instability and flexibility is necessary. And then they take that to an extreme and they think, okay, so I have to destabilize myself constantly. That must be the goal. That must be the thing, which turns out in anxiety and depression and being constantly overwhelmed. And at some point, there also you can completely lose yourself, and it's like being in quicksand and you don't know how to get out anymore. Everywhere around yourself, you just see instability and you know, frightening events and people being inauthentic, and so, you know, social encounters kind of are not a relief anymore, because all of that just breathes the too much intensity and the impact that it has. And then where's the point out? There's no stability. So I guess one thing to take away from that is we cannot just submit our life path to a principle that we heard somewhere or that we read somewhere and that sounds good. That stability and focus is great, or that constant change and constant instability, that must be great. We cannot submit to that because then someone else has made the decision over the framework of our life, and that is too much power to give away.
Yeah, but the problem is we have the marketing and the systemic frameworks around us, meaning that they lobby for one side or the other, right? So
yes,
you should focus, you should really like progressive growth, you know, and on the other hand is like, yeah, just like chill, just let go, let's smoke pots, let's just chill, and like let's go and Bali and chill out there, and like, you know, so it's like there's both kind of ideas pushing for the focus versus distraction, or the static, not static, but like more progressive, efficient route versus the fussy and sort of random path, right? So yeah, well, you say wisdom. The problem is, interesting they say wisdom requires wisdom, but then when do we know we're doing a wisdom-like act? You know, this is the thing, right? So when was a specific decision feels like a wise decision?
Well, maybe a simple rule of thumb would be to make sure that I have both in my life, right? So if I feel very free right now, I'm very flexible and floaty, to ask myself, where's my anchor point right now? Where's my point of stability?
Anchor point.
Within my life or outside of my life? Do I have enough things that stabilize me, that keep me from floating away? Vice versa, when everything seems to be fine and going in one direction, you know, I just got the confirmation for my next position for 2 years and family seems to be okay, to ask myself, where are my freedom points that make me flexible and make me feel alive? And it can be, I can try to introduce that into the places that give me stability. So within work, I can try to have, you know, a free project or something like that, or I can supplement my life outside of that, so that work is a anchor point of stability, and then outside of work I do, you know, free diving or whatever gives me.
So I guess this goes back to the testing. I mean, I like the word testing, meaning testing different frames of mind. So what I mean is, okay, instead of following a specific recipe, test many recipes. I mean, meaning, you know, okay, test the goal-centric, efficient path. Have goals and a list of to-dos, and you wake up and blah, 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 you know, it's like you have a very methodic lifestyle, you know, and then, but then you need to reassess, right? The problem is people do not reassess one path because they don't have a practice, what you say, they don't have a space to just reassess everything, right? Which they should. I think this is a fundamental aspect for, it doesn't have to be meditation necessarily. It could be, I mean, daily runs or walks or like gardening, you know, some just space for I would say a non-driven, goal-centric space.
So a space without agenda.
Exactly, a space without agenda, right? Yes, space that is just space. And then it just expands and contracts, right? But people do not developed that space either. So problem is there's several gaps, right? So people commit to one path, you know, the specific goal-centric, but then there's no reflecting point anywhere. So they get stuck in there, right? And they feel, oh, my life hasn't, I feel I've done these things very well, but I don't feel a flow. I don't feel this sense of like everything is connected, right? Because there's no reassessment, right? There's no reflection. Oh, yes, this made sense, but then maybe I need to let go of some pieces and then explore, insert some exploration in the static, rigid path, right? And maybe vice versa, you know?
Okay, so let's come back to this point. So let's say we have a lifestyle that is beneficial in that sense, that has a good mix of freedom and stability, of exploration and anchor, and to be grounded, then what would be the next kind of implementation for you that would kind of tap into something that feels even more valuable? To you, you mentioned the flow state a couple of times. What does that represent to you? So obviously, this is for you a very valuable state of mind or way of being. What does that mean for you, the flow state?
Yes. So this is a very, very important topic, actually, that I've thought for years about flow state, and what is flow, right? So, and goes back to meditation as well, right? So, or space practice, whatever. So is that particular state for which the idea of self and consciousness, the idea of being me, kind of stops. Meaning the agenda of me being Adrian and the goal-driven Adrian and this person that I am every day trying to achieve a certain amount of desires, a certain amount of goals, a certain amount of objectives and metrics, whatever, stops. All that mental backlog sort of stops. And it's just that kind of intent of, it's like life stops being perceived just by me. It's more like a sense of I'm part of the all. It's a very strange feeling because it's hard to explain it.
Okay, now it sounds interesting. What is possibly the benefit of that? Why would anyone be, you have something, there is an additional stuff that you have in mind and that I think we have not heard. Why is that interesting? Because, you know, in psychosis or when I'm dreaming, I'm having that. Why would I need to look further? Why is that interesting to an extent that it might be such an enrichment of life as you feel it? What is the added sense of value there?
Yes, because intrinsically us as human beings, as we, like I mentioned, we discussed at the beginning, right? We're born into a constrained systemic space, right? So we are inserted into a limited space for us to reflect about things that we could actually possibly reflect on. Meaning that when we grew up, we created so many limiting concepts and so many limiting activities as well. So my point is, life thankfully offers us critical points, meaning those kind of cracks and fractures, meaning you have a very stable life, but you break your leg. You have a very stable life and you meet somebody and then, wow, you fall in love, right? So you have this kind of turning points in life that provide an opportunity to kind of give you a little escape from the systemic framework that you're inserted into since childhood, right? And
that is bad?
Basically,
is that bad? It sounds like it has a negative touch in the way that you're saying it.
It's bad, the initial systemic framework, or
this constraint, the growing up, meeting someone, having a life.
No, it's not bad. It's good. But the problem is, most people don't get a chance. And at some point I didn't get a chance as well to reflect. Is this something that I really, this activities, all this life that I have, is something that really connects? Does it really connect with this, whatever it is, consciousness? Does it connect? Does it all make kind of, at least at some moment in time, does it all kind of connect?
Does that
connection
mean,
is very...
Yeah, I'm sorry. Does it mean that kind of, if I'm not connected, are these the cases where people live a good-looking life from the outside, but it's like they're empty shells? Is that what you mean when they're not
Yeah, of
connected?
course. Yes, it's like, even I don't mean like you're constantly in living an enlightened or in flow life every single moment. No, what I mean is at least a good bright star, so to speak, or a guiding light is like, at least you have some moments of clarity, some moments of peace,
Yeah.
some moments of peace and clarity, you know?
Okay.
At
And
least,
these
okay,
are
there's,
worth it, it seems to you. Like these moments give a quality to your being that, even though they're sporadic and, you know, not all the time, but it seems to me that you're saying, okay, and even if they're rare, but they make all the difference.
of course, because without, and then going back to that, right? Like talking about focus and distraction and finding that flow state, connected state, whatever. They're rare, very rare, but when they happen, this is what the Buddha calls he likes to call the enlightenment. I don't call it enlightenment. I call it just state of flow and connectivity and connection. You know, it's just like you start seeing things that you would never ever saw before, and you start feeling things that you never ever have felt before. It's like it's in a state of even hard to describe, because I think you kind of come out of your limited sort of conscious self, right? And those moments are, in my perspective, give me the guiding light to keep pushing through the chaos and randomness of and constraints of everyday life, right?
Yeah.
So, and the meditation practice has been like a fundamental kind of baseline to consolidate. I wouldn't even say like meditation doesn't guide us. No, it's more like gives us just a space, as I mentioned, or a space to.
It's like for
I don't
me,
even
it's
know.
kind of a lab. Meditation is like a laboratory where things can happen.
Right. Right. It's like space. I like to call it now. It's like we have just a space, right? And then you do stuff in there, and who knows, right? But people don't create spaces.
Yes. What you, I mean, you're speaking various in an associative way, so I'll try to boil it down to a few
Okay.
principles.
Yeah.
What he just said reminded me of William James's The Varieties of Religious Experiences that he wrote at the beginning of the 20th century. I think he didn't write it. It was a collection of lectures that he gave. It's a classic. I don't think that people read it too much nowadays, but he was one of the first who tried to find a common understanding of the various religious experiences that people have, regardless if they're Buddhist, Christian, Sufi, or whatever it was. Today, I think would be more accurate to say not a religious, but a mystical experience. And what he found, and it resonated with me, is that there are also, like you said, that there are rare occasions for people who had those experiences. And those rare occasions function even when they're gone. The memory of them somehow restructures our consciousness or our life or our mental apparatus, whatever I want to call it.
Yes.
So we have those dramatic experiences, and then they continue to have a function. They reorient my life. And for the people who went through that, it feels like that this reorientation is fundamentally more connected with them in whatever they're doing than what they have done before. And that after that, the resulting path is already more satisfying. Even if from the outside, it doesn't look like there are kind of measures of success that you can apply to that. But for the people who went through that and who have experiences that then guide them afterwards, it feels like there is a thread there. There's a connection there. There's a purpose, not the sense in the purpose that we can put it down on paper what the purpose is, but there is, it's as if the sense of fragmentation that we usually suffer from in life has lost part of its weight. Would that be a fair description of what you said?
Yeah, I think you put it very, very succinct, and you encapsulate it very nicely. So yes, it's that the idea of those moments, yeah, like you said, having those even sounds trite and sounds like cliched, but the epiphany, it's not even an epiphany moment. It's more like, I like to call the flow state, right? Those states for which the consciousness sort of dissolves a bit. You know, the idea of
Yes.
time and space dissolves a bit, you know? So it's like a
Let me
moment
put
of,
in brackets there, in
yeah,
a very specific way. Not all falling away of our mind or of ourself are
yeah,
pleasant or meaningful. It's important to say, I think, so that it's not heard as like, oh, he's advocating any kind of dissolving. No, some dissolvings are quite frightening and horrible. You mean a specific one?
yeah. So like dissolving of the self, the sense of self, right? Dissolving of time and space, dissolving the constant, I have to, or I should be
Yes.
doing this, or you know, it's this constant list or constant should nots dissolve. And there's just like this sense of being, but being sounds, again, sounds fluffy, right? Just being.
Yes.
I like to say it more, I guess you're connected with your intent, sort of, it's out there and you're feeling the intent is present. It's like a sense of present, like a more high definition presence. I like to say it like this, right? Like high definition presence. So it's like your perception becomes a bit more high definition in a way, meaning by high definition is, again, augments, it goes a little bit beyond the idea of selves. It goes beyond the self. And that's what I mean by higher definition, right? It's just the broadband sort of opens up a bit, right?
Yes.
And then you don't know what's going to happen after that. This is the beauty, right? And this is what people don't know, is like, what the hell is this? Why should I be doing this in the first place? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling kind of crazy, but then what, right?
Right.
So it's like, yeah, but that's the thing. What you mentioned is clear, right? It reshuffles the sense of self and consciousness. So when you go back to your normal self, quote unquote, I think you need to create a method to capture whatever you can capture, you know, from that moment, and it will create a lasting impact again on the process, you know, would shift the process again.
Yes.
And then maybe your new process will bring you to a new sort of cracking point again that might be different than the previous one, right? But then, so this is what I call with the movement, right? Static movement.
Yes.
Static movement, right? Static, but then it creates movement again, and then it becomes static and it creates movement again, you know? So
Right. And it seems to me, again, an element of what you're speaking is I'm gaining the ability to enjoy the ride. So before that, you know, and kind of when we're stuck in our ways and life becomes difficult and muddy, then it's not fun anymore. Like the next step is always just, and then that shit. Like, and tomorrow I have to do that. And then I have a conversation coming up with a friend. Yes, I want to see them, but at the same time, it's like I have to endure the food in the house. Like my sense of imagination always brings to it kind of the shitty aspect of what is to come. So the ride that it feels to us was enjoyable at some time, maybe at university, maybe school or whenever, seems to have been lost. And this game of fluctuating between static and fluid and all of that has a sense of joy in it. And if there is, I think, an overall selling point to what you're advocating, I think it's that there is that those elements might not be, at least from the outside, I'm sorry to impose that on you, but it might not be kind of the most interesting thing for people to fluctuate between those states and to have this flow that is maybe difficult to imagine of what it is, but it's enjoyable. And those variations that come throughout life that you cannot avoid anyway, you know, those surprises and the breakups and the good things and so on, the promise that there is kind of a way of life that makes it much easier to bear and makes you more resilient and makes you more interested in the aspects of what life brings. I think this is a prospect that might speak to many people, and why they would undertake an exploration like that.
Well, and also one point I want to add that it has been very clear to me is, those moments of, like, just for clarity, let's call them the flow moments, right? That way you can achieve through
Yes.
through the practice, through the process, right? Sometimes they're so strong that I get a sense, it's weird, but I get a sense of responsibility. Meaning, let's talk about a little bit more on the Buddhistic side, right? So those enlightening moments, right? That you become so enlightened that you have a strong sense of responsibility to share. It's like, it's not even you share the recipe or share the practice. No, at least share the fact that it's worth striving. It's worth going through those chaotic points, and it's worth basically going through the process, right? But I guess the tipping point here is there has to be an element of letting go. And I guess this is the part that I guess people struggle with, meaning they're going through life, but then, and there's learnings, there's insights, there's change, but there's still some mental chains, and there's still the systemic framework is still very well ingrained in them, right? That the idea of letting go of your own self, of your own identity, quote unquote, it's still quite hard and painful, right? Yes. So I guess the idea of letting go is somewhat not very well understood, and not very well, people are not, it's not very mainstream yet, right?
Right.
I read a book, let me just say, I read a book actually 7 years ago. It was called A Road Less Traveled by Scott, I forgot his name, Scott Bullock. So he talks about, this is not very popular road, meaning going through in order for you to get over things, whatever it is, like breakup or some crisis, is really confront the pain and let yourself, the old version of yourself, go completely. Yes. Which is not very mainstream or popular path to actually take, right? But he advocates that's actually a shortcut to growth, right?
Yes,
and
it can be done. Yes,
it can be done, but it could be painful. But then, so the question is, I guess I've been feeling like a little bit of an advocate to push people a little bit to let go a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Not create a recipe, but at least if something is tying them up, maybe cutting might help, cutting this relationship, letting go of this job, letting go of a lot of things can help to reassess. It doesn't mean you're going to let them go forever, but it lets you reassess, at least give them some space, So like, okay, you've been feeling too stressed because your apartment, maybe let go of your apartment and see how that feels like, right? Or the dog, maybe you have pets and the pets, the neighbors are complaining. Okay, why? Maybe you should get rid of the pets, right?
Or the neighbors.
Or stuff like, or the neighbors. Yeah, so it's like, people are scared of letting go. It's because our minds are attached. It's like when the sense of loss is so strong in our mind that it's just very difficult, right?
And
so
here I would like to wrap it up and offer a kind of a simple Buddhist psychological perspective on that. Very explicitly, the psychologist, psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan has started from a very unromantic point of view for the mind. For him, basically, the human mind starts with fragmentation. There is nothing unified in that. There's no romantic place where the soul starts, as one piece and everything is together and in harmony. And then somehow we are traumatized by our parents, and this is the beginning of, and then school is bad, and then life goes downhill from there. No, for him, it is from the beginning a fragmentation.
Yes.
And that is very much in accord with a way of Buddhist thinking, which tries to explain of why this mind has the obsessive tendency to latch on to almost anything that can give some sort of emotional story, would be it good or bad, right? And the idea is that it's because of this lack, the fragmentation, and this ingrown sense, the embedded sense that something is missing all the time. And that is one of the driving motors of the mind to always be in motion, hence to distract itself. And I can distract myself onto a trajectory of projected eternal growth. That can be a direction of distraction, because then I'm just in the realm of what I projected, right? I idealize the sense of growth, and then I get lost in that. Or I get distracted with my phone, or I get distracted with alcohol, or whatever it is. It basically, for me, it's a powerful theory because it doesn't need to explain much. It basically says, yes, if we let ourselves go, if we go along with the flow of the mind, this is what it does, because it knows nothing else. There is a lack, and it feels uncomfortable, and it constantly tries to get to do something against that. Now, okay, now when we speak of this states of flow or epiphanies or meditation, samadhi or something like that. So these kinds of states of mind, they seem to provide something that the mind is thirsting for, which is a place of unity and a place of defragmentation. And if you keep in mind or partly accept this, this theory, even though it might not feel like it all the time, that our minds are fundamentally fragmented, how much is the relief of the mind that experiences a glimpse of unity? Because then it feels, finally, this is what I've been looking for all the time. Of course, there are degrees in that. There is, kind of the small ecstasies, and there are the big ones where everything feels in place. But that can be so attractive and such an inspiration for the mind to see that, oh, so next to all the striving and next to all the searching, there is also something else. There's a point of peace where I don't have to do anything and things are just okay. And already it sounds like a marketing poster because it sounds great, right? And the mind kind of paints that into its own wall. The search for that can become a hassle because I might have, gotten a glimpse of a drug that is fantastic. So people get lost in that search as well. But in the end, I think there is more positive than negative, that there is a perspective of satisfaction that does not depend on attaining the next thing, and has more to do with letting go in the sense of understanding that the solution will not be in the acquisition or the achievement of the next thing. When I achieve the next thing, then the next acquisition, the next achievement will want its way. So maybe there's an alternative path of going to a different game altogether. Maybe there's more to gain there. Yes.
Yeah, I love what you said, the unity, fragmentation, defragmentation. Yeah, so it's like moments of unity, right? That I think Lacan was right. And in some point, yes. So everyday life, right? Things are pretty fragmented. You have your family, you have your friends, you're trying to date somebody, you have your work, you actually want to learn new language, you actually want to go on a hike. There's all these things we want, right? We want to also travel. We want to make a better pay, whatever, right? So there's all these things that our mind is constantly being bombarded by, right? So this constant, it's like a tugging war every day. You wake up and you have all these things pulling, right? And then get a moment for which all these pulling forces are into one direction. Is like, it's amazing. It's like incredible feeling, right? It all connects all of a sudden. The pulling forces are aligned, and you're like, wow, this cannot be real, that or this everything, it's all aligned. And then you get the moment, obviously throughout time, again, starts the pulling forces. But I guess what's interesting is there's a shift, definitely, in terms of how we perceive, again, those pulling forces, right? There's a shift on how we allow ourselves to be influenced by those pulling forces, by just even the sense of unity. But the problem is many people don't even achieve or have not even get a glimpse of the unity part, right? So, and that's, I think, a systemic problem throughout society, because it creates a sense of loss, right? And marketing and systemic frameworks trying to push in very specific recipes that are not conducive to much, right? So, so this is the problem, I think. Yes, definitely.
Okay, at this point, which is artificial, let us wrap it up.
Yes.
We might continue to talk about this topic. It's surely not finished in the sense that we've explored all the nooks and crannies there. But I think there's enough kind of interesting impact and potential in this topic so that some people who are maybe prone to these kinds of questionings and interested in the mechanics of the mind, and maybe had already a few of those inspiring experiences, maybe it's interesting for them also to pick up where they have been and to continue that journey between the known and the unknown, the inspirational and the static, and so on. It's surely always interesting to reflect on these topics. So thank you, Adrian, for this conversation.
Thank you, Gabriel. Great to talk to you today.